evening, everyone. Thanks again for making the effort and taking the time to come tonight. We're excited to see you tonight and to share some information tonight that I think will both be compelling and actionable. My goal over the next 20 minutes, 8 slides, so don't worry, not 48 or 60. The next 8 slides is to basically provide some general information about YOcoin and cryptocurrency, but perhaps more importantly, some context regarding the drivers, the disruptive drivers that are really affecting all of our lives. It would really be hard-pressed for anyone in the room tonight to argue that our lives and our society is not in a high state of disruption. Whether it's economic, whether it's societal, whether it's family, whatever it is, we're facing tremendous disruption. And the definition for disruption means to throw into disorder or confusion. So think about your life, think about the life of your family, and think about where there are areas that you're being thrown into disorder or confusion. I would submit tonight that there are 4 primary areas or categories where disruption is really manifesting itself in a very acute way. The first one would be financial, economic, societal, geopolitical, and technological. So we could have 500 different examples tonight, but let's just pick one for each of these quadrants. The first one would be financial and economic. According to a 2015 Pew Research Center study conducted just a year ago, the American families that were interviewed, of those, 55% stated that their financial situation was worse than a year ago. 38% said that it's equal to, they're just basically treading water, one nostril above water. Only 7% said that their financial situation was better than the previous year. Said another way, 93% of the respondents, their financial situation was equal to or less than where it was a year ago. You take that and then consider that the average obligation for each average American taxpayer on the national debt is $164,000. Not every household has debt. But for those that do have debt, the average amount of unsecured credit card debt for the American household with debt is $15,400. So it's clear that we're losing strokes to par, and we all know what the definition of insanity is. It's doing the same thing and expecting a different result. So rather than being on the reactive end of disruption, isn't it great to be on the preemptive and front end of disruption? So financial, economic is one. Another one that I find fascinating is in the area of societal or our society. And we're going to take the topic of the rate that human knowledge doubles. Prior to 1900, human knowledge doubled every 100 years. From 1700 to 1800, 1800 to 1900, every century, human knowledge doubled. At the end of World War II, human knowledge doubled every 25 years. As we sit or stand here tonight, human knowledge is doubling at a rate of every 13 months. With the advent of the Internet of Things, which is in its infancy, where there are 56 to 58 billion intelligent devices in our world that have an IP address that is a direct connection to the Internet, whether it's your refrigerator, your car, your alarm clock, whatever it might be. In a few short years, IBM research estimates that the rate of human knowledge will double every 12 hours. Wow. So that means that in a 24-hour period, the rate of human knowledge will have doubled twice. In 1 week, it will have doubled 14 times. Can you even begin to grasp what I just said in terms of the pressure that that's going to put on us in terms of the pace at which our society moves? So that's more of a passive, covert pressure on us, but the rate of knowledge, we don't even know how to spell the word disruption is the point. The third would be geopolitical, and that is that 1/2 of the world's adult population does not have a bank. They have no voice in the financial world as we know it today. Part of that is a lack of infrastructure, but perhaps the bigger driver is what would be the motivation for banks to basically build out infrastructure for guys that are earning $2 to $5 a day. There is no incentive. So 2.5 billion adults that are working beyond far less than a minimum wage have no direct access to a bank, so they're unbanked. That's why cryptocurrency is critically important for them as a driving force, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. Let's talk about technology disruption for a minute. The internet, we've known, has been around since the early 1990s, and if we asked each other prior to tonight, what percent of the world's commerce is conducted on the internet, I would have said 35, 40%. It's actually only 6%. In 2018, it'll be 8%. So we're still very early in the adoption of the internet. And we know it for Facebook, and we know it for social media or whatever, but we're in its infancy in terms of commerce. That's hugely important. The second thing is that 3/4 of the world's population today has access to a wireless network. So the good news is that although they may be unbanked, 3/4 of the world's population now is connected to a network, which makes the app that we're going to be talking about so important. And then finally, speaking of an app, look at the disruptive potential of applications. Your iPhone or your Android phone is no longer a telephone. It's really a computer that's an application platform. My 18-year-old son acted like the village idiot this past weekend with that Pokemon app. He was going into 7-Eleven. We dropped off his mother at the airport. There's a Pokemon in Terminal A. He went into Terminal A. Restaurants, businesses are being disrupted because of this game. You call it stupid or not, but Nintendo's stock has gone through the roof stratospherically because of the market pull of that app. So those are just a couple of examples of disruption. So the question is, as you saw, the glass is either half empty or half full. What are you going to do with the glass? You can look at disruption and we can put our heads in the sand and say, well, and ignore it. We can try to bargain with it. Please don't affect me or my family. We can wish it would go away. Or as we were talking, Keith and I earlier, we can skate to where the puck is going to be for once and actually leverage the disruption to our collective and individual profit and advantage. Amen? Amen. So, moving on, let's just talk for a few minutes about what is YOcoin. I mean, this is pretty primitive based on the subject matter experts that are here tonight. But let's answer two fundamental questions. What is YOcoin and how is it fundamentally different from the pack that's out there? First of all, the most basic definition of YOcoin would be it's an internet medium of exchange. It's a tool that facilitates trade between parties. And as we know, Bitcoin originated digital currency in 2009. So in basically 7 short years, let's think for a second about what has happened. It's far more than a medium of exchange. Cryptocurrency today is basically viewed as a container for value or as an empty vessel through which other goods and services can flow. So let's look at, consider real estate, gold, silver, stocks, and bonds. Those are all containers, full compared to cryptocurrency. So cryptocurrency is a container of value. So why would we say that? Well, about a month ago, when England left the EU, as we all know, after that vote, the British pound started to free fall. It wasn't dropping, it was accelerated free fall. Astute and agile investors quickly liquidated their British pounds and basically converted that resource into Bitcoin, into cryptocurrency, because it's viewed as a safer haven than gold and less volatile. Other applications that are currently being talked about right now, being actively worked to show how mainstream cryptocurrency has become, is corporations including Bitcoin on their balance sheets as an asset, or even central banks using cryptocurrency as part of their reserve portfolio. Can you imagine that 2-3 years ago? So that's how mainstream it is. It's not a matter of whether the train's leaving the station. The train's already left the station, and this is going to happen with or without us. So those are just a couple of anecdotal comments regarding, what is a digital currency. I think we've kind of beat that horse, sufficiently. Next would be a 90-second primer on the technology that basically enables cryptocurrency. So this is a 90-second primer, as I said, and the undergirding or enabling technology is a technology called the blockchain. And that's important for you and for people that you will talk to about YOcoin, or even if you're an investor, because the blockchain will do 3 things for you. It will make the transfer of goods and services. It will make it I just lost my train of thought. Excuse me just for a second.
No pressure, brother.
Sorry about that.
No pressure.
It will reduce risk, it will reduce cost, and it will reduce time, and it will result in an exponential increase in terms of access and convenience. And there's a reason for that. The blockchain basically enables a encrypted peer-to-peer connection between parties. So that encryption means something very important, and that is that transaction is impervious to or resistant to any type of hacking or cybersecurity issue. We've all heard about governments, banks, even universities that have been compromised. So that encryption ensures a secure connection. The other thing is that since the blockchain is an open register, all of the nodes within that network at any given time have a real-time image of each transaction that's occurring on the blockchain. So you could say another way that the blockchain basically polices itself. As such, there's no need for what we have called traditional trusted third parties, such as governments, banks, financial institutions. So why is that important? That's important for two reasons. One, that's a second level of elimination of risk due to human or technical error. But also it eliminates the transfer fees that we've all experienced from time to time in our past, both on the receiving and on the receiving end. If I asked you, which Bruce asked me several weeks ago, what percent of a bank's revenue come from transfer fees, I would have guessed 5-10%. The number's actually 42%. So, these guys are clipping coupons on both sides of the transaction. 42%. A large part of that goes away, obviously, with the secure, encrypted, transfer of funds with blockchain. So, even guys that don't like cryptocurrency, why they wouldn't, I don't know. Even they grudgingly admit that the blockchain is one of the most significant, pervasive, disruptive technologies that we've ever experienced. So now let's just talk for a second about what we call in technology. We talk about technology in terms of generation. YOcoin is a next generation, and we could call it a purpose-built digital currency, like some of the banners say here. The currencies you can see was originated in India, and it doesn't say 2012 or 2008, in December of 2015. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's roughly 8 months ago. That's the warp speed with which technology moves today. It's currently being purchased in 33 countries, and it was introduced into the U.S., as Bruce said, just 4 short months ago. And he knows better than anyone in terms of the magic and the momentum of YOcoin. I don't need to. These guys do. It's going to go live on 2 U.S. currency changes in July of 2016. I believe that is this month, if I'm not mistaken. So here in the next day or week, you're going to see that happen. But when we talk about purpose-built and next generation, that's really important to understand that, because YOcoin was developed by 3 former Bitcoin engineers that basically saw deficiencies, for lack of a better word, and inadequacies in the BitChain algorithm. An algorithm basically is a fancy word that means it's a complex mathematical formula, but for purposes tonight, we consider that algorithm, it's the genetic profile of a currency. A currency can't outgrow its genes. Just like we, in some cases, would like to outgrow our genes, currency cannot outgrow its genes. So the currency is only as good as that algorithm and as that genetic profile. And why is that important? Well, I'm glad you asked. Because the next question is what sets YOcoin apart. So this is probably the most important part of what you'll hear tonight in terms of the longevity of the currency and its ability to dominate the market. Let's go back to 8th grade geometry, or algebra, I guess would be a more accurate description. We look at the x-axis and the y-axis. For purposes of discussion, let's say the x-axis is time and the y-axis is volume. The Bitcoin algorithm was designed to execute over a 46-year period, We're 7 years into that right now. By contrast, the YOcoin algorithm is designed to execute over 96 years, more than 2x the runway. So the longevity of that currency will long outlive anyone within the sound of my voice, mine included. So the genes, in terms of the footprint, the size 15 shoe is that 96-year executable. The y-axis, let's view that as volume. That's really the capacity to perform over time. The Bitcoin algorithm will release 21 million coins into the market over that 46-year period. You heard Bruce say tonight that YOcoin will release 2 billion coins with a B over a 96-year period. That's infinitely greater scale, infinitely greater capacity to reach, the four corners of the globe. And as he said, it'll be the currency of the people, because don't feel sorry for Bitcoin. As the scarcity increases, 17 million of those 21 million coins have been mined. It's going to become a scarcer resource. The valuation is going to go up. That was the whole intent of the algorithm in the first place. But as it goes up, the people that have Bitcoin are doing great, but the Joe on the street, it's priced beyond his reach. Hence the widespread appeal of YOcoin. Second thing, that's the tip of the iceberg that's above water. What you see below the water that are the drivers of the adoption is something that has been spoken to tonight, and it's twofold. First of all would be the YOcoin application, a multi-patent pending application that is in the process of being rolled out. So that's going to drive adoption, worldwide. The guys in Brazil, guys in Argentina, Burma, Sri Lanka, wherever, since 3/4 of those guys are connected by a wireless network, they will have access to the internet. They can conduct trade with that YOcoin app. That's one brick. So user adoption is one brick. The second brick is vendor adoption. Guys that have stuff selling to them. Vendors want to sell to people the way they want to buy. If they want to use YOcoin as a currency to transact trade, they will say, yes, amen, hallelujah to YOcoin. And then, as Bruce and these gentlemen, or Keith and others, are the subject matter experts on the direct sales approach, I really don't have to say anything about that. I think that point's been made or will be made by guys that are more qualified than me. 2 more slides and we're done. So, as we said, YOcoin is slated to onboard into 2 U.S. exchanges in July of this year. These are the current exchanges. Don't know that that's, want to cause you to jump out the window with excitement, but these are exchanges that it's on tonight. But the big news is that it'll be trading on 2 U.S. exchanges, sometime in July, and I believe tomorrow's the 15th of the month, so that algorithm's kind of calculating down. Final slide for me, guys. Thank you, Uncle Paul. This one is also important for you and your children, your grandchildren, whoever it might be. This is really important because of the disruption that we talked about. The beauty of cryptocurrency is it's impervious to the sovereignty of nations. It transcends the individual trials and tribulations of a nation, whether it's the U.S., whether it's China, India, whatever it might be. So you can't manipulate YOcoin or cryptocurrencies on the exchange. You can't corner the market. It's impossible to do that. So it transcends the sovereignty of individual nations and their currency. And the currency is not bound by any individual country's current situation, whether it's societal disruption, whether it's inflation, government instability, burgeoning in national debt, unemployment rates, natural disasters, acts of terror, whatever it might be. That's why the savvy investors flooded into Bitcoin with the collapse of the British pound. Happened, the guys that were able to pivot saved their money. So the final thing I'll say tonight before I turn it over to the next speaker is, in times of disruption, 3 things happen. Wealth is destroyed. The guys that didn't move out of the British pound, their wealth was destroyed, was it not? wealth is created and wealth is exchanged. So let's be on the receiving end of that. So thank you for your time. I very much appreciate it.